Whoa, hey, where's that even coming from? I don't know. From outer space.
Down a little bit.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Is it noon? Okay, good. That's good afternoon. My name is Brad Allen. I'm the Executive Director of the Lawrence Public Library. We are so pleased to have such a great crowd. Thank you so much for coming. We have a few thank yous and some introductions, and then I will let the Judys get right to it. So we want to thank the Douglas County Community Foundation and the United Way for partnering with the library of the special Lunch and Judy's program. Get it? I thought it was lunch with the Judys, but it's lunch and Judy. Anyway. So let's give all of our partners a round of applause real quick. Thank you so much for helping us out. And another note, just before we get underway, I'll let you know there's another fundraising workshop coming up on April 11th. It's sponsored by the Douglas County Community Foundation and will focus on creating fundraising plans. So be sure to add that to your calendar. That's April 11th from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. and that's at the Lawrence Arts Center Auditorium. I don't know what day of the week the 11th is.
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday. Okay. So today, our event today is held in conjunction with the library's membership with the Foundation Center's Funding Information Network. These are databases and resources that we have available at the library, and they are funded by the Douglas County Community Foundation, and they offer invaluable information on fundraising, grant writing proposals, and nonprofit management. Shirley Bronlick, where is Shirley? There she is, go stand up. That's Shirley. She is our reference librarian who oversees the Foundation Center resources and can answer any questions that you might have at the library. So now on to our introductions. Our two presenters today are rock stars in the Lawrence fundraising world. Judy Wright, recently retired as Assistant Vice President of KU Endowment and Director of the Chancellor's Club. She holds a PhD in Communication Studies from the University of Kansas. Judy is a pragmatic and passionate fundraiser who works to find real solutions for those in need by creating relevant programs and funding sources to maintain them. Judy Keller is a Senior Vice President for Jeffrey Burton and Associates. She is well known for her ability to motivate staff, volunteers, and donors. Judy brings more than 25 years of hands-on executive and volunteer experience to her clients. She holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Kansas and an undergraduate degree from Oberlin College. Most importantly, these two Judys are so persuasive and so passionate about their fundraising that very few people can say no to them. We know this to be true. They are here today to fill us in on their most closely held fundraising secrets. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Judy Wright and Judy Keller.
It's hard to follow that, don't you? Well, Judy and I have known each other for a number of years, and we were excited when Kathleen Morgan Collins said, could you just do a little fundraising, the do's and don'ts, and you know, it's over the lunch hour, and it's easy, and there'll probably be 3 people, and oh my gosh. How many, no, I'm not gonna ask that. Who hates fundraising? Raise your hand. Raise it. Oh, come on. Who hates fundraising? Okay, and why? Why do you hate fundraising? Why do you hate fundraising? It's uncomfortable. What else? Who else doesn't like? Yes.
It takes us away from the work that we believe in.
Very good. It takes you away from the work you believe in. Why else do you hate it? Yes. Okay, not very much return for the effort. Okay, one more. Why do you hate it? Yes.
Because I may not be able to match the amount that I'm asking for. In other words, I'm not able to give what I'm asking for.
Okay, you're not able to give what you're asking for. That's a great point, Allison. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Well, I have a very brief story to tell you, and it is an absolutely true story. I'm on a plane, I'm going to New York, I'm doing an event, and we're on the runway and we're waiting to get off the ground, and this woman turns and she looks at me and she says, next to me, and she said, oh, are you going for pleasure or business? And I said, well, it's pleasurable, but it is work. And she went, oh. And there's a moment, and then she says, well, where do you work? And I said, well, I work for the KU Endowment Association at the University of Kansas. And another minute goes by, and she says, and what do you do for them? And I said, well, I'm a development officer. And you can see her eyes glaze over. And I said, I'm a fundraiser for the University of Kansas at the KU Endowment Association. And she just got the most pained look on her face. And she said, oh, I hate fundraising. I had to do it once for my church. People would not call me back. They hated to see me coming. They would move to the other side of the street when I was walking toward them. They made all kinds of, how can you ever do that job? And I said, well, I love it, and I'll tell you why. Now, don't laugh. It's all about making dreams come true. When you are passionate about the thing that you're raising money for, and you love it, and you want somebody else to be a part of that, then it's like making dreams come true. And you know what? You get to make that ask. You have the privilege of asking them and saying, would you join me in this effort? Because I think it's so important, and I think you love it, and I think you're passionate about it. So would you help us? Would you come be a part of this team and make it all happen? So that's why I love fundraising. It's a privilege. It's an honor. Now, I'm going to give this to Judy, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
Judy's right, it's not about the money, okay? Fundraising is just not really about the money. But here's the part that is about the money. How are you going to organize yourself? You probably don't have a staff that KU Endowment has in your shop. How many people are single development officers? Okay, how many have more than 3 people in their development shop? No. Everybody's got less than 3 staff, 3 full-time people. How many are volunteers? Fantastic. Thanks for being here and taking the time to commit for your organization. So how does a small nonprofit organization get started in this? Take out a pen and help me now in drawing what is going to be an old-fashioned digital face clock. And at 12 o'clock, I want you to write the word identify. And then an arrow down to the 3 o'clock. The very first thing you need to do for your organization, whether it is a small organization and you're doing this on index cards at the dining room table, or whether you've got a database management system, the very first thing you have to do is identify who your prospects are. Now, in development jargon, there are suspects, people that might be interested in your organization, and there are prospects, people that have some mild indication of being interested in your organization, okay? You've got to identify who you're going to pursue in fundraising. This is not about broadcasting, it's about identifying who your best prospects are. And we can spend a whole day on whether we're talking about individuals or foundations or earned income, but for these purposes, we're really talking about individuals because individuals provide 87% of every dollar that goes to philanthropy, over $300 billion every year in this country. And individuals provide the lion's share of that. So that's really who we're talking about. Identify who you've got and then draw an arrow to the 3 o'clock point where you're going to write down interest. You've got to involve these folks. We're going to invite them to events. We're going to invite them to tours. We're going to get to know them, right? They're prospects at this point, but they've got to know something about your organization. So look for ways to involve them in your organization. Look for ways to get to know them personally. And I know in town we have lots and lots of worthy organizations and lots of people, and I hear over and over again, it's the same people on the same list. That's okay. They're all great people. What you want to do is involve them and connect them with your organization. Then at the 6 o'clock point, we are going to eventually ask them for money. We're going to solicit at the 6 o'clock point, right? And we've got arrows leading up to that. And there are lots and lots of do's and don'ts about the actual solicitation that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And you have some on your handout. But we are going to ask for a gift, and I'll tell you, every once in a while I run into, in working with clients, I will run into executive directors or development officers that never actually ask anyone for any money. They are so busy making lists or drawing brochures or whatever else they're doing that they never actually sit down and ask somebody for money. So that's the piece that we want to spend a little extra time on today, because the number one reason people don't give is they haven't been asked. That's right, they just haven't been asked. So at 6 o'clock, ask them, and don't be afraid to. And then run an arrow right back up to the 9 o'clock point where we're going to steward this relationship, especially once they become donors. Because the least expensive way for your organization to raise money is to go back to someone who's already given to it. So keep those people close. They've given you a gift. They're your friends. Keep them close, and they will continue to be your friend. And ultimately, if you really take care of that relationship, they will give you the ultimate gift. And what's that? A gift by bequest. Elevating your organization to the level of a son or daughter or spouse. But it's all about the relationship, and managing that is a continuous cycle. Who are the best prospects?
Current donors.
Right, thank you. Chip, you don't count. You're a sponsor. You don't count. Everybody else, tell me, who are your best prospects? Thank you. Your current donors are the ones you want to spend the most time with. And then, of course, which Judy's so good at doing, tell the story. I often will tell facts and figures, but it's the story. It's not only the intellectual side of the argument, the case for support that your organization is going to make, but it's also the emotional side. You want to have both. Some people are driven by facts and figures. Other people are driven by emotion and stories. So when you're drafting your case for support or when you're making your pitch, you want both. And that's a really important part of how to get started.
I have a little story to start this next section. Several years ago, there was a campaign in town made by a church, and there was a couple that go to this church and were very loyal to this church, and they were also wonderful donors, and if I used their real names, probably half of you in the room would know who they were, but I won't use their names. And so the development officer at the church called and invited the husband to breakfast and said that he wanted to talk about the campaign. The husband, Frank, went to the breakfast, listened to the development officer, heard everything that he had to say, and the development officer ended up asking him for a 5-figure gift, something over $10,000. And Frank sat there for a minute and looked at him and said, "You know, I need to talk with my wife, Sue, about this, because she and I make those decisions together." I think they probably eventually gave, but my friend, Sue, was livid that the development officer did not include the wife in the ask. So that is one of the don'ts. Don't not include both people if you have a married situation. Which leads me to the idea of asking women for money. There's a great deal of research in our country that tell us that men give for different reasons than women. And I think this might be gradually changing, but there was a wonderful book written a little over 10 years ago called Reinventing Fundraising. And it talked a lot about how you work with women versus how you work with men. Now, what I'm about to say is a little stereotypical, but all of you know that there is some truth to all stereotypes. One of them is that men like to give for recognition of some kind. Maybe it helps their business, maybe they're going to have their name in the newspaper, maybe their name is going to be on a building, maybe it's going to be on a room in that building. Maybe it's going to be in the program all year long at the University Theater or the Lead Center. But they like that. That appeals to them. They also like what you're doing, but they like that too. Women, on the other hand, and again, this is a generalization, it's not true with all women, like to give for different reasons. And I'm going to give it to you in the form of what I call 6 C's. First, they like to create. Women love to create something from scratch, and if it's going to help that organization, they want to be a part of that. Secondly, they like to connect. They like to connect with the organization that they're giving to. They don't want to just hand a check and walk away. They want to be a part of things. They like to connect, and I see people kind of shaking their heads. Yes, they do like to do that. Third, they like to commit that organization. You know, it's hard to talk with Kathleen Morgan without her getting you to commit to one thing or another with regard to the Lawrence Public Library. And so women like to do that. They like to commit. And then they like to make a change. If something has not been going well, and they're asked to be involved with making that change, that is very, very appealing to them. They like to collaborate together, whether it's men or men and women. They love to collaborate. So get Jane together with somebody else in the room, and they're going to build something and create something, and that sounds like a lot of fun and worthwhile. And then lastly, they love to celebrate their success. You know, many organizations think one way you fundraise is by doing events. And I think there's a caveat to that. You can make money doing events if you have a lot of sponsorships, because that's money above what the person gives that walks through the door. But to use an event to make money and you think you're going to make it off the sale of the ticket, many times you're lucky if you even break even. Or maybe you spent a lot of time on an event and it nets $2,000. And it's not a good way to fundraise in that sense. Unless, and we have some sterling examples in this town of big events that have lots of big sponsorships. So you walk into the event and they've already fundraised $100,000 before you ever walk in the door. And that is the exception. So women like to do those 6 C's. Now again, this is somewhat stereotypical because you will say, well, I know a woman who'd love to have her name on that building, and by God, that's the reason she gave. And I bet Chip would agree with me that there are probably as many reasons that people give money as there are people. Everybody has things that make them feel like it's a rewarding thing to do. So that's what you want to think about. And sometimes, not all the time, women are very, very connected to human service organizations, and they like to give to human service organizations.
Thank you, Judy. I hope you're writing down your questions and comments so we can have a great exchange when we're done with our brief presentation, because I know there are stories in town that might challenge some of the things you're hearing, and we love a good discussion. The next thing we want to talk about is actually making the ask. I mentioned earlier that I had worked in a couple of organizations, with a couple of organizations where the development officer great person, just never actually asked anyone for money, it's a problem for an organization. Let's talk about how to make the ask. How many of your organizations are using the telephone to ask for money? Anybody here actually dialing for dollars? Political campaigns do it all the time. It's political fundraising, really, dialing for dollars. And about 50% of those calls will actually, depending on your list, will actually pan out. Universities do it, of course. Those are big operations, and they do it because it's successful in aggregate. It may be really bothersome at dinner time, but they do it because it works, right? So that's phone solicitation. How many organizations here are using direct mail? Okay, that's probably the most common way for an organization, no matter what size, to raise money. Again, it depends on your list, how qualified, how strong your history is with the names on the list. But in general, you can expect a 3 to 5% return on a large direct mail piece if you've got a really good qualified prospect list. So you have to run the numbers, right? We say fundraising is about 80% art and 20% science, and the 20% art is you've got to run the numbers. How many pieces are you going to mail? What's it going to cost you? What's your gross? How many, what's your expected income? And in general, 3 to 5% is a fair amount to expect to come back. So not a lot in terms of numbers, but if you have a large prospect list, it can still be worthwhile, especially for acquisition mailing. How many people here are from organizations that actually have personal solicitations? Oh, what's everybody else doing? Those are the big three. What's everybody else doing? Special events? Events, okay. So we really are here to help. You can recover from special events. You can move on. Everyone stand up and you can say, my name is Judy and I need to move on from special events. It's okay. We see that all over. And I'll tell you what, Columbia, Missouri has it even worse than we do. Little aside. Yes?
We do it, we don't just do phone or just do mail, but we typically have a list, and then we send out a personalized letter, and then follow up with either face-to-face or a phone call, depending on how well we know somebody.
Great.
So we don't do it one or the other. It's
You're doing both. Good. So you're more sophisticated than I am portraying us all to be right now in talking about either or, because most organizations will have a combination.
Yeah.
And the very best, if we have to pick one, the very best way to solicit someone, especially for a significant size gift, is eyeball to eyeball, face to face. So let's all try again. How many people are going to start doing personal solicitations for their organization? Because they love their organization so much. Somebody's breaking down and we're having a nervous breakdown in the corner. This is not good, Judy. I'm not doing well here.
No, I just knew it was coming. I didn't know when.
I was doing a personal solicitation.
Well, what a great segue. There are lots of good ways to do a personal solicitation. Catching somebody off guard in the middle of a fundraising seminar is probably not the best way to do it.
I bet you I get something from it.
But what you could say to somebody that you run into at the library or in the parking lot is, hey, I'd love to call you about Lawrence Children's Choir. Is that okay? Right? And then you call them and set an appointment and go in person. And through that conversation, which we're going to talk about more in a few minutes, through that conversation, you're going to get back to what Judy talked about in her very first sentence, which is your passion for the organization. And there's nothing more compelling than one volunteer's passion for an organization to another volunteer or prospective donor. If I say, Chip, I care so much about Lawrence Public Library that Tim and I have committed $100,000. Will you join us? That's pretty compelling stuff. Much more compelling than if I call and say, we've got a challenge grant and will you send them something right away? Right? So there are lots of different ways to make the ask, and we're going to encourage you to overcome your fear of personal solicitations, because it's not about the money, it's about your passion for your organization, and you're inviting someone to join you. And I have worked with volunteers over and over again where we practice before we go into an appointment saying the words. And I would recommend that you practice saying them out loud. Sally, we would be so grateful if you would consider a gift in the range of $10,000 over the next 5 years. And then silence. But you got to practice saying that out loud. Judy's got some more material, but before we jump into that, I want to draw your attention to the fundraising pyramid. We won't spend a lot of time with this, but it is a way to visually understand this concept of identifying who your prospects are and increasing the level of involvement and the personalization of the ask based on the size of the gift. The larger the gift, the more personal the ask. I received a letter from an organization here in town, a great organization, but I only went to one event, and they sent me a Dear Judy, not Judy and Tim, but Dear Judy, please give us $10,000 letter. Not good, not good. So the fundraising pyramid is a way for you to think about how you approach someone and who you're approaching.
Thank you. Now, we want you to do a little work. Most of you have 4 people, some of you have 3 at a table, but I want you to look on the back of your handout and you'll find a page, Making the Ask. And I want you to take 2 or 3 minutes to write down what you're going to ask for, and then I want you to divide into pairs. Now, there's a table of 3 over here, and I think you 3 could work together just fine, but we're only going to give you about 10 or 12 minutes. We want you to fill this out. Nobody else is going to look at it. You can, write it any way you'd like. But you want to name your organization and what is your need, what is your ask, and then a little bit about the background, the need, be specific, and then ask for a specific amount, as Judy has indicated, or a range of a specific amount. Now, she has already told you a lot of good hints. These are the hints for success. Be a good listener. After you've made the ask, as Judy says, do not say one word. I don't care how long it takes. You do not say one, you don't even move in your seat. They will respond. If the answer is no, or I've got to think about it, probe a little bit to find out what questions there might be, or when you might be able to get back with them. And then the last thing you want to do before you leave is thank them. Thank them for their time. Thank them for their interest in hearing what you had to say, and thank them for their consideration of the gift to come. So, you got about 10 minutes, and it's 12:30, so get to work, and then we're going to hear results. All right. I hate to interrupt this good ask conversation, but I'd like to hear from at least 3 groups about their ask. What happened, what didn't happen, what you wish had happened, how terrible it was, how great it was. Was it great? Let me hear from you first.
I was on the receiving end, so Tara has not done a lot of fundraising, and she was fabulous. So give her a big hand. This is her first probably ask. this super ask, and she said that she was nervous, but actually got through it, and the hardest part was sitting still after the ask. And I found the same as well, just that it feels like a century, doesn't it? Not just a minute or a couple seconds. And we had a great time, so thanks, Tara.
Good, thank
Good to
you.
have the format.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Someone else.
I would love to hear about your experience. What's something that didn't work? Can anyone tell me that? Something that didn't work?
He's tight.
I will tell you about her ask.
Okay. Here.
She is professional in that she has done this several years and with great success, I might add. We have got a lumberyard in Baldwin we're converting to a theater, and we continue to have various approaches. Her approach today was to come to me and ask me for a set amount of money. I countered with, knowing my budget, I would be happier to buy a set of lights for the stage or a couple of chairs, and we began a exchange that way. So yeah, I think that we can both help each other, but yeah. But you know, Sandy and I kibitz back and forth anyway.
Thank you. That's great. That's great. And did you feel comfortable asking for that set amount?
Yes.
Good.
Well, she's talking to my wife.
Okay, I'd like to hear from somebody. Oh, good.
Hi, I'm Lori, and I'm from Visiting Nurses, and we were talking about our 3D fundraiser that we have coming up, which is on April 11th, by the way. I'm a shameless promoter, so we were talking about how we approach our sponsors, and we try to tell a story of not just why we're asking for sponsorship. It's not necessarily for the event, but it's for the patients. It's for our 15-year-old patient Michael, who has IV steroid infusion treatments in his home, so he can go to school like a normal kid. And one thing that we realize that we're not doing is that when we ask for the sponsorship, we just say, would you consider being a sponsorship for our organization? But we don't necessarily ask for an amount. And so, what we talked about doing is saying, you gave on the $2,500 level last year. Would you consider bumping up a level and going to the $5,000 level this year? And, really talking about the good that it would do.
Great. You do want to ask for a specific amount or a specific range, because then the other party knows where they are and they know their own budget. And like this gentleman said about the theater in Baldwin, and I read about that in the paper, that's very exciting. You know your own budget. And if you can't do $5,000 and you say, I'd like to consider $3,000 if I could pay it out in 3 years, because I could do that, then you know what you have. Anyone else?
We talked a little bit about the differences between approaching an individual and approaching a business, and one of the opportunities with approaching a business is to appeal to their marketing and the many logo placements that, especially with social media, that you can offer to that business.
That's great. That's quite a good point. And when you are approaching businesses, many times that business will have a budget that will have a philanthropic fund, but they will also have a marketing fund. And if marketing their product to your specific market is good for them, then that's a win-win all the way around. Well, thank you. You all have been wonderful in this, and we're just about to finish up, and I'm going to go back up towards my colleague here. The one thing I would like to end on from my portion of it is, and I'm a strong believer in this, and Allison alluded to it earlier, I think when you're out asking for money for the thing that you love and that are passionate about, you need to give to the organization yourself. It may be $20, it may be $2,000, it may be $20,000. It doesn't matter, and you never have to tell how much you have donated. But you can look that prospective donor in the eye and say, this is important to me. We have made a commitment in our family, and we'd like for you to consider a payment. So making the donation yourself is a win-win situation all the way around. Okay, Judy.
Amen. We'd like to have a few minutes for questions, comments, feedback. Does anyone have any questions, Mike?
On a tax credit business, is there a particular time of year that's better to approach them for a taxable gift than another, where they can claim it off their income tax? Or their
You mean in a case where the organization has tax credits to offer?
No, where we're coming to them and asking for a tax exempt gift, is there a better time of the year to come in for a business or?
Well, toward the end of the year, Judy's saying, I don't know, my husband owns a small business and a tax is a tax is a tax. So I think any time of the year, a gift is, as long as it's to a 501c3, it's going to be tax deductible to the full extent of the law. So assuming that business plans with an annual budget, it should be all right at any time. Remember, all the research shows people do not give to nonprofit organizations because of the tax advantages. They may time their gift due to taxes, but the initial interest in giving a gift is not generated by taxes.
We have found that there are some large corporations who actually make their allotments or whatever, like by November for the next year. So if you have a large company that you're wanting to ask, particularly I'm thinking sponsorships. You know, if you've got $5,000 or $10,000 sponsorship that you're trying to get sold to them, they have their groups that get together and meet in November for the next year. So those would be the only ones that I can see that it would matter.
And I think that's true. Some of the businesses and employers in town do budget in the fall for the following fiscal year. Sure. Any other questions, comments? Yep.
When you're asking for donations or sponsorship or what have you, how do you go about kind of renewing your list? For instance, you know, we have a database of over 45 years of giving, but there's always, you know, new opportunities. So how do you go about finding those opportunities?
You're asking about prospecting? It is amazing how much information here in town, locally, is publicly available. It takes time. It might take interns. It might take a whole bunch of people with their laptops and a bottle of wine. It's been done. But a lot of information about who gives and even at what level is already available through organizations' websites or annual reports or thank you lists to campaign donors. And that is all fair game.
I just had a question. Do you have any advice on, I've been exploring blast emails and using those more regularly for smaller dollars asked. Do you have any tips and advice for blast emails?
Do you want to answer that, Judy? I'm hogging the mic here. Oh,
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I've been exploring using blast emails for smaller donations and maybe those smaller recurring
donations, and I'm just curious if you have any tips and advice regarding fundraising and blast emails.
Oh, and block emails?
Blast emails.
Oh, and blast emails.
I don't have a lot of information on that because I've never been involved with asking for donations. I've gotten them, I've received them, but I've never done one, so I don't know.
I've had some clients that have used social media fundraising quite effectively. It's not necessarily the number of e-blasts that we focus on in creating a e-fundraising campaign. We focus on peer-to-peer contacts. So rather than, or in addition to an e-newsletter from the organization, the most effective ask on social media is, again, person to person. But it's better in person than by email.
Just dovetailing to that, any thoughts about Kickstarter or other crowdsourcing fundraising?
They're great. They're working for individuals, often for organizations, especially of a certain size. Once you get into $1 million in annual operating revenue, they're really not appropriate. But they're working for individuals. They're also good, social media is also great for political campaigns.
Is there any, the question was brought up over here, I just wondered if there's any more to be explored in when you're asking from individuals as opposed to organizations for support. And any guidelines of, how do you decide how much to ask for?
That's a great question. And you need to do some research on the individual or the organization to find out whether their giving pattern's been in the past. Most people, unless you ask for an amount that is so far-reaching that it's humorous, most people are complimented if you ask for more than what they might think. In other words, if you ask them for $10,000 more than what you might think that they would be willing to consider, there are many times they're complimented by that. If you ask them for a 7-figure gift and they've never given more than $10,000 at any one time, again, there are always exceptions to the rule, but more than likely they'll laugh at you because they'll think, how could you begin to think that? Yes, Peggy.
Another thing that strikes me has been the most effective is it's the relationship you build. And it doesn't happen in, one ask. It doesn't happen, so we do it by asking people to come out to tour, to have lunch with us. We'll meet them somewhere else. We'll invite them. We'll put them on our newsletter list. We'll do all these things, which is what you were talking about first, was cultivating them. You can identify them, but a lot of people have the ability to give that don't perhaps look like they do. But if you have a passion about what it is you're doing and you just want to share that, you never know where that's going to go. So it's not always, an ask isn't necessarily there. You build a relationship. Because what you did, you're asking for big bucks. A lot of us are asking for a lot smaller. But you didn't ask the first time you met them. You built up one.
You do build and relationships are very important, I agree. And through that, you might learn a little bit more about what the opportunities, how capable somebody is as you build that relationship. Other things, yes.
Could you comment about follow-up? We had talked about that earlier, just the length of time you should wait before you follow up, or not wait after making an ask.
Right. Well, Judy has a really good rule of thumb there too, but we were saying if someone says they want to think about your ask, then maybe one of the last things that you say to them before you leave them is, do you mind if I call you in 3 or 4 days just to follow up on what we've talked about, and then make the call? I can't tell you how many times, and well-intentioned people are, and they just didn't get around to following up. Judy, you want to tell about your 31-day plan?
I'm trying to remember what I just told you. In general, we do, so we'll have a list of pending asks, right, with the client and see how much that is going to be. And in general, you want to have a touch every week. It may not be a final decision, but if you have some sort of exchange or conversation on topic, that's great. If it goes 30 days, then we say it's dead and you're starting over. And it's pretty compelling to volunteers to not have to start over. So when you're trying to motivate folks to just go ahead and make their calls or make their follow-up calls, remember that if it's been 30 days since you asked, then that's as good as dead and you have to start over. Any other questions, comments? We're coming up on 1 o'clock, and I know we get the hook at 1, but we're both happy to stay and visit with anyone that might like to afterwards. Any more questions?
And thank you for being so much fun.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for your time in the last hour for your organization, and truly for all you do for Lawrence. This is in Douglas County. It's just a great place to live, and it's because you're all actively involved. So thank you.